And welcome, everybody, to the Huddle, KGUN9's weekly streaming sports talk show. I'm Jason Barr, joined by Pat Paris. Pat, good afternoon. How are you today?
Great. It's March Madness. I'm great.
It is Sweet 16 time. Arizona advancing with a couple of wins. They're on to the second weekend and headed to LA to play Clemson. And Pat, that starts us off with our Huddle poll question of the week. Da-da-da. All right. How about this, Pat? ESPN giving Arizona a 79% chance to beat Clemson in the Sweet 16. What's your take? You can only pick one. One, I like those odds bear down. Two, hey, this has been a good bracket for U of A, right? Long Beach State, Dayton, and now a 6th seed with Clemson. Or three, hey, let's not look ahead to a possible matchup in the Elite Eight with North Carolina. You got to pick 1, 2, or 3. Where are you going?
Once again, Jason, there's a little bit of, my thoughts in all three of those, but I'm going to go with one. Bear down, go Cats, like the odds.
We lose Pat.
You did?
I think we lost Pat for a quick second.
No, I think it's you. It's actually you.
Pat, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I think you're freezing up, Jason. But
I am.
I'm going with one, Jason. Bear down, go Cats. I do see a little of everything. In 2 and 3, a little bit of 2 and 3, but I'm going to go one. I really like their chances against the 6th seed in Clemson right now.
I'm going with 2. I mean, you can pick all 3. Okay. Yeah. I think most people are going to go with 1. I'm going with 2. It's been a good bracket for U of A, and sometimes that's what you need. Nothing wrong with that. Before we talk about Clemson and get ahead, let's just take a quick look at last week's poll question and see what won. And that was, what do you think of Arizona's NCAA bracket? So basically, this was going into the NCAA tournament.
Right.
Great draw, easily a Sweet 16 team, right? We had some nervous Nellies and hesitant after 2 recent losses. That's what won. And 3 was, let's take it one game at a time. All right. So Arizona wins. They get the 2 victories. Long Beach State and Dayton, and now here they are about to play Clemson. They're 3-0 all-time against Clemson as we take a look at the Sweet 16 bracket. The Arizona game is first on Thursday. That's going to be 4:09 our time on CBS. Then the North Carolina-Alabama game. Wildcats 3-0 all-time against Clemson. I haven't played them since the 2012 season, I believe. Did play them in the NCAA tournament once in the late 80s. 3-0 all-time against the Tigers, Pat.
Yeah, and Clemson has, I think, maybe one signature win. That was early February. They knocked off North Carolina at North Carolina. We've seen in the U of A's case that sometimes that can happen. You stumble a little bit. Clemson is a mystery, though, because, they have that signature win in early February. They have a decent couple of home wins in March, but nothing really led you to think that they were going to make a Sweet 16 run at all. In what led up to the tournament, but here Clemson is sitting there as a 6th seed. They're always, these teams are always dangerous, Jason, for a couple of reasons. One, they got nothing to lose. They're not supposed to be here. They're playing with the house money. They're loose. They go. And then when you're in those arenas, as well as I do, Jason, if it's not U of A Wildcat fans sitting there in that arena, everybody else is going to be rooting for the underdog, and that tends to get a team a little bit unsettled if they're not a veteran team. And hopefully, with enough veterans on this Wildcat team, they'll be able to handle that.
Take a look at Clemson, who held on there against Baylor. They were up big and then had to hold on in that game. They played good defense for, I think their coach, Brad Brennell, said 58 minutes of that game. Yeah. In the round of 32 against Baylor. There'll be some fans, from upstate South Carolina, John Coliseum, who will make the trip to LA, but I don't see it as a neutral site. I think this will be heavy LA. It's Arizona's first trip to the Staples Center since they beat Xavier and then lost. Actually, it's crypto.com now, right?
Crypto.com now, yeah.
That's right. They beat Xavier in 15 and then had the rough game against Wisconsin when Sam Decker and Ryan Kaminsky kind of went off a little bit. There was the game in which Stanley Johnson was poked in the eye. But they're 6-3 in LA is Arizona in the NCAA tournament,
Right.
and they're heading back there. And what's funny about the roster, Pat, is that normally, when we talk about Arizona going to LA in the NCAA tournament, we do a couple stories on the Wildcats who are from LA, right? And there's only one scholarship player, one Arizona who's even from California, right? That's Keyshawn Johnson from Oakland. So no Wildcats. I think there's a walk on, I believe it was from Southern California, but yeah, very much an international team and a different team that Arizona's bringing this time around.
Yeah, and a lot has been made of, and I think it's important to bring it up again. Is you mentioned Keyshawn Johnson came up, one win short of winning a national championship. You got Caleb Love 2 years ago at North Carolina, comes up one win of winning a national championship, losing both of them in the championship game in successive seasons. So they've got a lot of motivation. And you mentioned as well that loss to Wisconsin. There's little demons you want to exercise here. For Arizona, it's getting past the Sweet 16, or in the case of LA, getting on to the Elite Eight and then getting on to the Final Four. With this team that lost last year to Princeton unexpectedly lost 2 years ago in the Sweet 16 to Houston, got to get over that hump, got to get back to the Elite Eight. And then we're talking here on a Tuesday. We won't talk again until the following Tuesday. Then you got to get over that hump, win the Elite Eight game, and get to the Final Four, which we haven't seen a Wildcat team do in 24 years, Jason.
What's interesting is here's a team in which Kylan Boswell scores 20 points in the first round, and I think like 2, right? In the second round, as we look at Umar Ballo. But it's a different player who comes through for the Wildcats each night. It's not like one player they have to rely on. I think the guy who you really want to see get going is Caleb Love, right? But other than that, it's always somebody different who's having a good game and somebody who maybe isn't having a good game, whether that's Ballo or Keyshawn Johnson or Pell Larson or the bench with Bradley and KJ Lewis, who have been good at times but inconsistent at other times. Love is the guy who you want to see get going because they are a better team when he's scoring and dangerous for sure. But other than that, it's really a different player who's leading the way for Arizona on a given night.
Yeah, and you can actually break that down even within the game, Jason. We saw Caleb Love come out of the gate in that first game in the opening round. Just came out on fire, and then he cooled off. But then as you mentioned, you see Boswell kind of take over and dominate. That can happen even within a game. You're finding that one player that is trying to get going as best you can, even within the game. And I think we're having some issues with Jason breaking up a little bit. But yeah, you got a Caleb Love first half of that or first part of that opening game. Then you had Boswell kind of take over. You don't know what's going to happen in these games. But I agree. I think if Caleb Love is Caleb Love that we expect him to be, this team is much harder to beat. It's much more difficult to beat. Yeah, I'm not sure if Jason can hear us or not.
Yeah, like you said, Pat, we got an engineer here, so yeah, we're doing okay though. I heard basically, what you said. Caleb Love, and we talked about this last week. He did not have a good ACC tournament back in 2 years ago, and then of course he had the big NCAA tournament. I do think he's a player who's going to rise up on the big stage, and I do think he's gonna be there for that Elite Eight game. And then obviously, if he plays North Carolina, we call him the Caleb Love game, right? If Arizona and North Carolina play, but big storyline there. Big storyline there if they get by Clemson, because they would either line it with Caleb Love or they would play Alabama, who they beat earlier in the year.
Yeah, that's right, and that'll be an interesting game too. We all hope, as Wildcat fans, or at least those that follow Arizona, that they'll get past this game against Clemson, and then it is an interesting matchup. And I don't think North Carolina is a shoe-in. You can't just pencil them in already into the Western Region Final against Arizona. I think Alabama is a formidable team, and I would say that what I've seen from Alabama in this tournament, they're a better team than what we saw when Arizona played them I think back in December during that remember that stretch where they played so many games in a row. They ended up losing to Florida Atlantic as well. But I think that could be an even better game on the nightcap Thursday night of the West Regional is North Carolina and Alabama.
Well, I know Arizona fans will be watching that if Arizona wins the first game to see who they're going to play. And that game that Arizona beat Alabama, and that was up in the Phoenix area.
That's
and
right.
Of course, you got another Wildcat who would be going up against his old team there in Jaden Bradley. But I don't get too ahead of things with the Sweet 16 game and Arizona. So, hey, they were in this spot, 2 years ago. It's Tommy Lloyd's second trip in 3 years to the Sweet 16. Actually, Patty's one win away from tying the NCAA record for most victories by a coach to start his Division I career. He would break that if he gets 2 wins. And of course, the other stat, which is already cinched, he's going to go his first 3 years without losing back-to-back games
which is remarkable,
in Arizona,
right?
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
well, that tells you about a team that can be coached, right? Tommy Lloyd has teams that can be coached up. So, in other words, you lose a game, you have practice, you come right back and you win a game, and you just get on a roll. They obviously, it's not as if they've won, lost the entire time. They've gone on long winning streaks too. But it's a team that doesn't let the one loss define who they are. They figure out a way to get things turned around, and then they go on and win.
Jason Barr, Pat Paris here in the Huddle talking about the Sweet 16. Pat, Arizona, the only Pac-12 team alive. The other 3 got through the first round, so we thought, hey, Pac-12 might be showing something. But then, Washington State with a tough draw with Iowa State, and then Oregon, really bizarre, just playing 2 players. It was 2 on 5,
right?
With Oregon, and then. Who's the other team I'm missing? Colorado. I never thought they were that great. A little biased because Arizona beat them so handily with 2 games, and they did a play-in game. But here we have Arizona, the only team in the Pac-12, going up against the Clemson team, one of 4 remaining in the ACC. So a Clemson team that's battle tested, but also a team that lost in its first game in the ACC tournament. I think scored its fewest points of the season. This is not a high-scoring game. It's a very, very winnable game for Arizona. It really is. The draw is going to be a big thing. We've seen that the last couple seasons. It was a tough deal with Houston in the Sweet 16. You never want to see Princeton in the first round. They got the draw they were looking for here with a Long Beach State and a Dayton team, good but not great. And a Clemson team wasn't a top 10 team all year like Arizona is. Just a fantastic opportunity for this team to advance.
And it's been one of those tournaments, as you mentioned, Jason, is a great draw in the sense that you got that win where it was not that big a deal in the opening round. Dayton gave you a little bit of a test, and you were able to pass it. It wasn't ever really in question. They cut it to single digits, but then it was basically at 10 or more the entire game. Now you're facing a Clemson team that I just don't see how they have the horses to do it. Now, granted, anything can happen.
That's their leading scorer right there, PJ Hall.
Yeah, anything can happen in the tournament. In Arizona, what I like to see, what I like Tommy Lloyd, what he did in that Dayton game was they just completely had to go away from their normal set for a little while to change things up. They went away from Ballo and Krivas. They went to a smaller lineup to try to battle a center that was much quicker and more agile than their centers. And it worked to a certain degree. They were able to kind of maintain, as I said, that 8, 10, 12-point lead that whole time that they went through about a 5-minute stretch where they were playing that way. So they're able to adapt and adjust. And if you ever question whether or not Tommy Lloyd, can get the job done with in-game management and in-game changes, they did a terrific job in that Dayton game. If that kind of thing happens again against a Clemson, they'll know, maybe a little something they can do to tweak the lineup in order to change the look against Clemson and get the job done. And then you get to a North Carolina where, I like our bigs against their bigs. So I like the matchup. I like the weekend ahead. It's not going to be easy, but it certainly sets up fairly well for the U of A.
Pat, Umar Ballo is not on that very elite level of centers. He's not at the same level as Zach Edey. He's not at the same level in Fale Dante on Oregon. And he doesn't shoot foul shots well.
No.
But he is Arizona's all-time leading field goal shooter at 65%. I did not realize that.
Yep.
He does not – he plays smart basketball. And, when he has a size advantage, he really can establish himself inside. And, he gets the team going with those dunks. And so, he and Krivas have been a very good, 1-2 punch at center. I know sometimes they do go with a smaller lineup, but generally when he's out of the game, it's Krivas who's in.
Right.
So, all right. So we want to take a look here. We've got some results in so far, Pat, to our Huddle poll question for this week. And not surprising here, right? This is just a few in small sample size. But, Arizona given 79 chance to beat Clemson. I knew when I wrote this that the first one would get a few more. But, I think the third one was also going to get some votes, too. You can't look ahead to UNC.
No, you can't.
I don't think anybody is, though. This is the Sweet 16. Nobody's looking ahead. You don't even know if North Carolina is going to be in that game at this point.
There's no weak team, that makes it to the Sweet 16. Rarely does a weak team make the Sweet 16. NC State, they're on a roll. They make the Sweet 16. Clemson, somehow they're on a roll. Nobody saw this coming. They're a 6 seed. And everybody else is, 1, 2, 3, or 4 basically left. So Gonzaga a 5. By the way, how about Gonzaga? Under the radar all season long. They had a couple of losses to St. Mary's, and you didn't think they were going to be very good. Here they are once again in the Sweet 16, representing the West, just like Arizona and San Diego State, who's now a perennial Sweet 16 team. And maybe, who knows? Maybe they're going to be heading back to the Final Four. We'll see.
Arizona and Gonzaga, the two schools in the nation with three players who have more than 120 assists on the season, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, only 2 schools. So
that's impressive. Well, that's how they get it done, right?
Yeah, no coincidence. Obviously, the Arizona coach Tommy Lloyd was Gonzaga assistant for 19 seasons. All right, so you're heading out, Pat, to LA before we get to the NFL kickoff. Any final thoughts? Any real big storylines? Going into this game, I think the storyline is Arizona going to get to the Final Four? It's been 23 years. Yeah. I don't think it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
I remember the Elite 8 losses in 2011 and the back-to-back ones in 14 and 15. I don't know. I need to look it up. Did they have an elite? Maybe a viewer knows. Did they have an Elite 8 loss between the Final Four appearance in 2001 and the Elite 8 loss in 11?
I'd have to look it up, but I
feel like there was. We will if they get to that point.
Yeah, I feel like there was, but I don't know that for a fact.
The point being, the storyline here is, can this team get back to the Final Four where they haven't been in 23 years? And they got as good a shot as any against a team they are favored by 7.5 points with Clemson, and against what's thought to be, if UConn, Houston, and Purdue, maybe UConn is on its own level, right? Then Houston and Purdue are kind of on that next level. And then there's, other teams. They don't have to face one of the real juggernauts, in the Elite 8 to do it. Not that they couldn't win that game. They played with Purdue, earlier in the season. So
they did.
Play with
they did. Yeah. Your question was, have they been to the Elite 8 since
between 01 when they made the Final Four and 11?
They were in the Elite 8 in 03, 05, 11, 14, and 15 since 2000.
Wow, so I didn't know 3 and 5.
Yes.
So they've been to the Elite 8 5 times since going to the Final Four in 01. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's been 9 years since the last time they were even in the Elite 8. So,
boy, has a lot happened in those 9 years. One quick final point I want to make before we get to the NFL kickoff thing. I was thinking about this, Pat. U of A basketball is in a far better situation than it was 3 months ago. And here's what I mean by that. Tommy Lloyd enters a press conference and says, I didn't come here for budget cuts. The football coach leaves for big bucks. There's no AD. And we don't know about the NIL situation. And we're sitting here. What if Ohio State throws big bucks at Tommy Lloyd or Michigan or somebody else? Right. And in the last couple of months, U of A gets an AD and signs Tommy Lloyd pretty much at about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
He gets the contract extension, and Josen Sanon commits, one of the top 10 commits to add to Carter Bryant for next year.
Yep.
And now they're back in the Sweet 16. Yep. So this has been a really big few months after what I thought was a big time of uncertainty a few years ago.
Yeah. And it could have gone the other way. I'm not sure it would have gone the other way, but it could have gone the other way, because I do really think that Tommy Lloyd was going to honor his word, and he was going to once that extension was done, he was going to sign it. But you just never know, Jason. You never know. The Washingtons come calling and Jed Fish leaves. Ohio State comes calling. Or now it would have been, Michigan come. You just don't know. I take Tommy Lloyd's word at face value. I really do think he would stay, but anybody would be enticed to go somewhere else if the money was right and the situation was right. But thankfully, as you point out, and all those, you did a really good job of kind of chronologically spelling it out for us. But that there is definitely a different feel about this, not only basketball program, but the athletic program as a whole, a month or two later from where it was when there was no athletic director. Now, there's still a budget shortfall hanging over, and Desiree Reed Francois is in that position so she can help guide them to more NIL money, more maybe naming rights money, whatever, to get the program back on solid financial ground. But I think we all feel a lot better about where it is now than it was a couple months ago.
I was worried about the program a few months ago. All right, let's finish it up because the NFL is such a behemoth. It's such a big deal, and it's such a big rule change. And I'll just recap quickly for those who don't know.
A lot of people may not know this happened, Jason. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll do a little recap here. The kickoff, as we know it, has gone away, is going away. The kicker is still going to kick off from the 35-yard line. However, the two teams are going to be lined up at the opposing 40 and 30-yard line. And then there's going to be two members deep back to return a kick.
Yep.
So basically what you're doing here is you're avoiding runners getting the kickoff team getting a big running start and having a collision at high speed, which is what has caused the most concussions. And so basically the reason why I don't think this is as big a rule change is I think what they've done the last few years has really been a big rule change in order to, when they had the fair catches and when they had the kickoff going way back in the end zone, only 21% of kickoffs were even returned, right? So right. I think this is actually a little bit more back to normal than what it was before. So I see this as not a radical change based on where we were last year, a radical change based on maybe where we were 10 years ago, but not based on where we were the last couple of years. So I think this is a good thing, and I'll get to where they're getting it from and all that in a second, but let me let you jump in here.
Yeah, the purist in me goes, well, do we really need to change it in the sense that I don't see a lot of kicks being returned? But as you point out, a lot of kicks weren't returned anyway, just because kickers are so good at putting that.
That's why I think the goalposts need to be narrowed for field goals, but that's another thing.
Yeah, that's another story. But the purists would say no, they don't need to do this. But when you understand the injury aspect of it, yeah, I think that it was inevitable that this was going to happen. I just don't see how this is going to result in many, if any, kickoff returns for touchdowns.
That's the big question that we got to see.
So do you just take it out and just put the ball at the 25-yard line and start there? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way they'll go.
From the XFL. This is now the second big development, if you will, because the original XFL back in 2000, when they had the cameras on the strings, that's something the NFL implemented. They hadn't had that with all the different angles before. So that's what disruptors do, right? They challenge the status quo, and now we have a couple of changes thanks to
the product better. Yeah.
Thanks to the old XFL and then the more recent one. I think it's now the USL. So yeah, I think this is better, but I think you hit on the big question. Are we still going to see kickoff returns for touchdowns? Because we got a guy going into the Hall of Fame this year who was one of the best ever at Devin Hester, and really unique talent. And I would hate to see if the next Devin Hester can't do his craft and do what he did because the NFL kickoff is so different. So I hope that these guys can still somehow, get touchdowns and find a way to do it, because
that there are coaches right now figuring out ways to design the blocking scheme to use, to set it up so that you can form some kind of wedge there with the second return man back there and figure out a way to bust through that line, because that's you're spread out, Jason. You got 9 guys spread way out there blocking, and it's one man to beat. So if you can get by that, you really just have to deal with the kicker, and we know that doesn't usually work out well for the kicker. So there's a way to do it. I just don't know how often we're going to see it.
It has not made sense to me the last 5 years or so, 3-5 years, that a 37-yard kick is for 1 point, but a 30 or 25-yard kick can be for 3 points.
Yeah.
I didn't like that at all. I just think they should have narrowed the goalposts
What,
instead of doing
let
that,
me
because
ask
it's
you.
too easy for field goals and kickers
Yeah.
and all that. I would have narrowed the goalposts.
Well, as you and I have covered the indoor game, those goalposts are only 10 feet wide. They're harder to kick. Now it's a smaller field, I get it, but it's much more a tough kick. Let me ask you this: how long before college implements the kickoff rules then, or even high school? Because isn't high school where we see more injuries right now that end up being way more traumatic if these kids continue to go
Well,
on
because
to
the
other
brain is
levels to get.
younger. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you'll see that. Give it a couple years. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope so, because I think that's where you could really help resolve a lot of injuries that don't need to happen, especially on these kids that are 17, 18, 16 years old when they're just developing. I mean, you even go down further, lower than that. I mean, I think it'd be a great thing to do.
Yeah. Pee-wees,
Yep.
the 3-year-olds who are playing. Nah. All right. Uh, Pat is headed to LA, so have a safe trip, Pat.
Thank you.
We'll see your coverage. And if you're just joining us and you haven't voted yet in our poll, ESPN giving Arizona a 79% chance to beat Clemson. Pick one of the three. Please vote kgun9.com/poll and see what you think. And we'll see if we get some more votes for 2 and 3, because I know one will win. So
I'm doing it
anyway,
right now, Jason. I'm using the QR code right now.
all right, terrific.
I'm gonna
Well, we'll
vote.
look forward to your coverage starting Wednesday,
Yep.
Thursday, and hopefully we'll have coverage Friday, Saturday, and even
Let's
Sunday
hope.
too.
Let's hope.
Because I think they were due, and I think it's their time. So I got a good feeling about Clemson, and I think when you get to the Elite, anything goes. Elite Eight, anything
Yeah,
goes. So
I do too. And I'll go back real quick. This thought came into my head. Our Wildcat analyst that we have a lot of times here, Ryan Hansen, who does the color on radio for Arizona basketball. I asked him if he considered Arizona, right there at the blue blood level with the Kansas and North Carolinas and the Kentuckys, and he said no, because we haven't been consistently going to the Final Four.
regular season, yes. Overall, no.
But overall, no, because we haven't seen Arizona playing in the Final Fours. And once you get to the Final Fours, winning national championships, great. We have one. Like to get a couple more, and then you can cement yourself as a blue blood. You can't even really call it a blue blood program until they get to the Final Four a couple more times. So there's no time like the present.
All right. On that note, we will end it there. This has been the Huddle, KGUN9's weekly streaming sports talk show. For Pat Paris, I'm Jason Barr. We're going to bear down here. We are, we look, obviously we're journalists and we aren't biased in that way, but this is our hometown team and our
Come on, I went to school there, Jason.
where we are. So,
let's
and also the more the way they win, the more exciting it is.
Better. For everybody.
Come on. I didn't go to Arizona, but I root very hard for very, very hard for the Arizona teams to win for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. And we'll see you right back here same time next week.